is really where the jobs of the 21st century are, but in many cases, we are not training people. These are not only different skills, they're different ways of thinking. They require systems thinking, whole systems thinking, integrative thinking. So, um, so I said opportunity, number one, affordable housing. Number two is not only education, but education that is training people to adapt to the challenges of the 21st century. Number three is extraordinary health care. We need healthy food. We need arts and culture. By the way, arts and culture are not just for our delight, but interestingly, arts and culture are based on symbolic thought, and symbolic thought is what gave rise to civilization. It's actually what gave rise to language, and it is what gives rise. Remember, I just said in education we have to learn to think differently. What we really need to do is enhance our ability to have symbolic thought. That is something uniquely that humans do that is key to our ability. Remember, I started by saying we need vision. That's really a capacity that comes out of symbolic thought. So we need, as I said, we need to think about the jobs of the 21st century. We know that people, so there is, the connectivity is hugely related to opportunity. That people who live in communities in which they can somehow through mass transit or walking get to education, get to libraries, get to arts and culture, get to jobs, get to parks and open space, get to healthier food, they do much, much better than people who are isolated. So connectivity is another key part of what may create communities of opportunity. There's another thing, which are vibrant social networks. In 1997, there was a great heat wave in Chicago, and 700 people died. A demographer named Eric Kleinenberg mapped where the deaths were. And what he noticed was there were higher death rates in the poor black neighborhoods and lower death rates in the wealthy white neighborhoods. But there were two poor black neighborhoods that had the lowest death rates. And the reason why is they had a fantastic, vibrant social networks that were church-based networks. And they were networks of care in which people actually checked in with each other every day. They checked in with the elderly, they made sure that they were fed, they made sure that they had water. These systems existed for decades before the heat wave. So they were preparatory. When the heat wave came, those senior citizens, because those are primarily who die in heat waves, were well supported. And that's why those communities had the lowest death rates. So social networks are also a key part of the resilience and a key part of what creates opportunity. So we can take these constituents of opportunity that I've just described, we can measure them. Remember I said earlier we need dynamic systems. We can actually see how good is the food system, how good is the transportation system, and we can really work to equalize opportunity to make sure that every American citizen has equal access to health and jobs and affordable housing and mass transportation, etc. And if we invest in that way, balancing humans and nature and equalizing opportunity, then I really believe we can create extraordinary cities. We just have to have the vision and the will to make it so. So I want to end with a quote from an architect named Christopher Alexander, who said that making wholeness heals the maker. If we have a vision of wholeness, and we actually dedicate our lives, our work, our businesses, our cities, our political aspirations towards making great wholeness, that heals not only society, it heals ourselves. So I'm going to end with that, and now I said a lot of things, probably too many things, so I'd love to pick up on any one of them, ask questions, let's have a conversation. Yes?
Affordable housing is a big net, so
Yeah.
if you have any thoughts or comments on those programs like high-tech visit Section 8 vouchers, and how you think the GSE is putting into all that.
Okay, so the question about affordable housing is a kind of technical question, but number one, the answer is we need everything. So we do not, again, if America has a 20 million affordable family gap today, we build, the low-income housing tax credit builds 65,000 units today altogether. We may build with some other programs 75, 80,000. We lose 120,000 affordable housing units a year to either abandonment or gentrification, and so we're going backwards. So all these programs matter. We need Section 8, we need low-income housing tax credit. They're inadequate. They don't begin to match the need. We should be building, we have a 20 million unit gap today, and we know the population's growing, et cetera. So should we be building 2 million a year? I mean, how quickly should we be solving this problem? So 2 million a year is 20 times more, at least 25 times more than we're building today. So we need to keep every single thing we have, and we need to amp them up significantly more.
With the GSEs?
So the GSEs, by the way, for people who don't know, are the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and HUD. They're the federal or institutions that help fund the multifamily and single-family mortgages. We absolutely need them. If they may change shape or form, but without a mortgage finance system, an affordable mortgage finance system, it's a necessary tool in what is currently an inadequate system. So losing it only makes things worse. We need actually to strengthen all of these things.
Thank you.
Yes?
So I have a question about Boston. So
Yeah.
We have this, like a lot of cities, we have a crisis of a lack of middle-income housing.
Right?
We have a lot of a majority of families are housing cost burden, and we have failed public transit system.
Right.
And one depends on the other. The middle classes,
Right.
households depend on the public transit to make the city vibrant. How can we engage stakeholders, like employers, in helping solve this problem? Because they depend on the vibrant middle class and the transit system to get them to the sources, the places of employment.
So one of the things I have found is that most companies are working hard enough just in their own business. So we used to have an era of civic leadership. So there, by the way, there's a really interesting article, 2 articles you might want to read, in the Harvard Business Review coming up. It'll come out in the May-June issue, which is about how Harvard promoted this idea. There's a better article. So this is not an anti-Harvard rant, but in Newsweek a week ago, so if you Google Harvard Business School Newsweek, there's a fantastic article that says that Harvard Business School ruined the world. Now, I'm not saying Harvard Business School ruined the world, and I lecture there every year, and there's some really wonderful people there, but what it said was, see, in the 1950s, American business leaders believed they had a civic responsibility, that they were tied to their communities, and that they had multiple stakeholders, and that was their job. So the idea that a civic leader, a business leader was going to make sure there's a good transit system was part of American ethos. The greatest master plan in the 20th century, the United States is considered the Burnham Plan of Chicago. It was not created by the city, it was created by business leaders. Central Park was imagined by business leaders who had been to Europe, to London, and said, we need a Hyde Park in New York. In the 70s, this idea that a business leader's sole role was to create shareholder value, that they were, it's called an agency theory, that they were agents of the investors, the stockholders, and that's their only job, decimated the moral compass of American business and decimated this idea of shareholder value. And this is, so it's in both these articles, one in Harvard Business Review and one in the Newsweek article. They describe how this infected American business and the negative consequences of it. And so we currently have a culture of fewer, there are some very good business leaders who actually believe that they have a civic responsibility to their cities. They'll say, I'm too busy, I've got too many problems to solve, that also solve the transportation problem. So that's issue number 1, which is we actually need businesses to, so I actually believe the fact that Harvard Business Review has written this article saying what the next generation of moral business leadership should be is a very good sign, but it's going to take another generation to get there. But we don't have a generation to waste. So we need to build, so for example, the Imagine Boston 2030 process that's going on, I think is a good one. But we really need to, so I'll give you another example. So we need to build the civic leadership to have vision for our cities. Businesses certainly have a role to play. I believe every citizen has a role to play. We have also, since in the 1970s, we began to shift our view of who individuals were from citizens to consumers. So we also need to shift that back, that people, in effect, and even like, how do you make the world a better place? You buy Patagonia, you buy good things. By the way, I like Patagonia as a company, but consumption is not the pathway. It can contribute to the pathway to solving things, but it is not a sufficient pathway to solving our problems. So we need a new civic consciousness. Now, as I described, these things are expensive. And we have to be, so the other thing, the other disease of the 1980s was an anti-tax disease. It's something that said that it's bad to pay for civic goods. We actually, the only way we're going to solve our education system, the way we're going to solve our transportation system, the way we're going to create the opportunity for more middle-income housing, is we're going to have to radically rethink our zoning. We're going to have to be willing to tax ourselves more and invest in things that make our cities better places. And that requires a different kind of social contract that we are completely capable of. We just have to have the will to make it so and the vision to make it so. Yes?
What are cities that are kind of like what you have in mind that you think are around the world or in the US that are making steps towards what you envision?
Great. So, there's some amazing cities. One of my favorite is Singapore. I can describe incredible things that go on in Singapore, and every time I do, people say, "Yeah, but that was a dictatorship." It's becoming a democracy now. But there's one paragraph in the book in the introduction that goes, "Imagine a city that had the recycling system of San Francisco. San Francisco has the best recycling system in the world. They recycle 80% of their waste. The education system of Finland. Finland has the best education system in the world. Every child is equally educated. And by the way, in 1970, they had a crummy education system. They set out to have the best education system in the world and then created it." And it goes on and on. It says, imagine the arts and culture of New York and the access to parks of the mountains that Seattle has and blah, blah, and the food of Tuscany, and it lists 50 cities and something amazing going on in that city. And says, imagine we put those all together. And the reason I did that was because each one of those things is real. Italy really does have amazing food. And San Francisco really does have amazing recycling. And Singapore, by the way, has an astounding housing system where there's no homeless and everybody is housed. Because they tie their housing finance and their pension system together so that your pension plan, actually you're investing in your unit. Anyway, bottom line is everybody is housed in really good middle-class housing. So the point is, it's not one city, it's taking elements of every city, and if we could put those all together. And the reason for it is, the reason I'm drawing on places where these things really happened is because we could really do all these things in our cities too. Yes?
You mentioned the lack of vision as a
Right.
primary stumbling block.
Yes.
So we've looked to, cities and states have even looked to the federal government
Right.
to really have vision around topics like affordable housing. So how do you, if we have plans on the city and
Right.
state level that are actually good, based on
Right.
best practices, how do you actually get that ramped up? Because I think Singapore's great. We're looking at Massachusetts, looking at their education. We've traveled there.
Right.
But how do you scale that? I mean, Singapore is great. A lot of these places like Scandinavia, they have great systems, but it's not on a scale for the amount of time we have to address these issues to get, how do you get from there to scaling it up to work in the United States when we have, it's a lot bigger.
So here's the thing, that's why I love cities. Because the question is, how do we scale things up? And it's very hard to solve a 300 million people problem, but it's much easier. So is Boston 750,000? How many people are in Boston?
630.
Pardon me?
630.
630, I gave you credit. So 630. 630 is a whole, it's not easy. I'm saying there's a lot of politics, a lot of complexity here, but it's easier. Cities are the level, and I have seen some really amazing things happen in cities when they lay out a vision and decide to really go for it. They can, it takes decades, but it can really make a difference to the city. So I'll give you an example that's in the book. So in when the civil rights issue happened, in 1950, Birmingham, Alabama, and Atlanta, Georgia were exactly the same population within 1,000 people. And their income was exactly the same within $1,000, the average income, the median income of those two cities. Birmingham, when the 60s happened, they were both steel towns, turned inward and racist